Let me try to give you another example of the difference between scholastic inquiry and Buddhism. I will use an example of my hand. Okay, as we look at this hand, common knowledge would tell me that this is a hand. Okay, what about medical science? Medical science would tell you that this is a structure of bones and muscles, as well as nerves and cells. Okay, so this is how medical science looks at the hand. What about literature? Literature will look at a hand as a type of what we call style or gesture, as well as expression. From literature, a hand is a way for us to express ourselves, to present our style, and so on. And on the other hand, from the perspective of philosophy, philosophy will probably look at the hand as an embodiment of destiny and friendship. And in the condition of summation, summation will tell us that the hand is regarded as real, as something that truly exists. It's here, it's right in front of me. I can see it, I can also feel it, therefore it has to exist. But the Buddhist view provides a penetrating X-ray, which surmises that the hand is really only an elusive form, that it is unstable in nature, and it will eventually decay and vanish. And in other words, from the Buddhist perspective, we see a hand only as a phenomena that is ultimately empty in its nature. And let's try to extend this discussion by extending on the example of my hand. For example, if I was to extend my hand or make a grasp. Okay, how do we interpret these two actions? From the perspective of common knowledge and intellect, it would tell you that I have grasped some air and dust particles. Or I could even say that this is only a movement and a gesture. Okay, this is from the common knowledge and intellect perspective. But the Buddhist point of view sees these two actions in a different way. It tells us that the grasp is like a dream. It's like an illusion. It's like a bubble or a shadow, or even like the dew or lightning. In other words, the Buddhist perspective in seeing these two gestures tells us that these are only phenomena that exist because of the combination of certain causes and conditions. For example, the causes and conditions of the fact that there's bone, there's blood and cell inside this hand, which makes it what we call a hand. And it allows this hand to function like a hand. For example, it grasps, it extends. These are all the causes and conditions which make these two gestures possible. So they are not just some action of grasping something or a movement. They're much more than that from the Buddhist perspective. And therefore, by looking at the different interpretations of a hand from different points of views, we can see that human perspectives are sometimes very narrow and confined. And these are exactly what stops us from looking at the world with ultimate wisdom. In other words, we have to realize that through the eyes of ultimate wisdom, we will see that worldly happiness and suffering do not have an absolute existence of their own. They arise only because of the differentiations we make in our perceptions and cognitions. And when we come to understand and accept the Buddhist teachings, we will need to change our perspectives. And as we learn to change our perspectives and look at this world through the eyes of prajna wisdom, we will be able to turn what is good, what is bad, into good, to change the way we live our world, to change the way we see this world. Once there was an old woman who was always crying. Whenever it is raining, she will be crying. And whenever the sun comes out, she still cries. She cried all the time, no matter what kind of weather it was. And therefore, people started to wonder why she was crying all the time and asked her. And she finally told them, "Well, I'm crying because I'm always worried about my 2 daughters. My elder daughter is married to a rice noodle maker. Therefore, whenever it rains, I will start to worry about her. If it rains, she cannot go and put the rice noodles under the sun for them to dry naturally. Without being dried, they cannot be sold, and she won't be able to make any money. So I worry about her when it rains. On the other hand, whenever the sun comes out, I think of my younger daughter. She's married to an umbrella maker. If it's sunny, then nobody's going to need umbrellas. So who's going to buy her umbrellas? And then she won't be able to make any money to make a living, and then she will be in trouble. This also makes me sad. So it makes me want to cry to think about these 2 daughters who are having trouble making a living." So she cried all the time. She cried on sunny days. She cried on rainy days. And one day a Buddhist monk walked past the village and heard about this old woman. Therefore he went up to her and said, "Hey, there is a way for you to stop crying and make yourself a happier person. I can also help you stop worrying about your daughters." "How?" she asked. He said to her, "There's only one thing which you need to do. You need to change the way you think. From now on, whenever it's sunny, I want you to think about your older daughter. I want you to think about how she's able to put her rice noodles under the sun, allow them to be dried and ready to be sold. And whenever it is raining, I want you to think about your younger daughter. Think about how when it rains, she would be able to sell lots of umbrellas. And then wouldn't you be happy that way?" The old woman thought about it and said to herself, "Hey, this works. I think it makes sense." Therefore, she changed her way of thinking, and from then on, whenever it is sunny, she thinks about her older daughter, and then she smiles. She's happy. And whenever it rains, she would think about her younger daughter, and she would also be happy. Therefore, she was always smiling. And by then, people changed from calling her the crying woman into the happy woman. So how do we change from being a crying woman to a happy woman? That's simply by changing our perspectives of this world. And this will involve our careful observation and understanding of dependent origination as well as causes and conditions. And now as we talk about how all phenomena depend on causes and conditions in order to exist, then we will realize that cause and condition are 2 basic factors which produce or underlie each phenomenon. And as we look at this, although they are the 2 basic factors, we also have to realize that cause is more powerful than condition, while they are both needed in order for a phenomenon to exist. Let me give you an example. A seed needs soil, water, sunshine, and air, and so on in order to grow. So when the right causes and conditions are present, a result or an effect will occur. In this case, the cause will be the seed, which is more important. The seed has to be there, because without the seed, even if the secondary conditions are present, even if sunlight, air, water, and fertilizers are there, they still won't be enough to make a seed grow into a tree. So cause is there, conditions present, when both are there, when the right conditions are present, and then the seed will be able to grow. And secondly, let's look at another example, the example of a house. A house would need bricks, it would need concrete, it would need wood and all kinds of other material in order for it to become a proper house. And so once again, the cause of a house has to be there. We want a house. But the conditions of this material also need to be there. So both of them have to be around in order for a house to be present. And thirdly, if we were to look at a banquet, a banquet as the cause, then we'll realize that the right conditions also have to be there in order for a banquet to be successful. Once there was a rich man who held a banquet, and on the day of the banquet, he was waiting and waiting and waiting, and then when half of his guests were there, a chef approached him and said, are we ready to present the food? Then the man said, let's wait a little longer for the rest of the guests to come. However, he kept waiting for another half an hour, but the rest of the guests were still not there, and some of them were very important guests. And this started to make him anxious, and he couldn't help it. He started to feel annoyed and said, "Geez, I don't hold a banquet that often, and when I finally do, all the guests who are supposed to be here are not here yet." And as the rest of the guests heard what he was saying, they were already sitting there. It made them feel uncomfortable because what he was saying it seemed like he was saying that they are the ones who are not supposed to be here. So some of them were so unhappy that they stood up and left. And not knowing that he had offended his guests who were already there, he said, "Oh no, I don't hold a banquet that often, and when my half other guests are not there, those who are not supposed to leave have already left." When he said that, what about the rest of the guests who were sitting there? So am I the one who was supposed to leave? This made the rest of the guests very annoyed, and so all of them stood up and left, leaving the man alone at an incomplete banquet. So the cause of a banquet is there, yet the conditions were not present. The second half of the guests were not there on time, so that was a lack of condition. And the other lack of condition was the rich man's inability to say things properly, which offended other people. So we can also say that these were the conditions that were present to make this banquet incomplete. So the right conditions required for a banquet to be complete and successful were not present. So basically, we always have to work hard to make sure that we actually provide the right conditions to make our goals successful. Otherwise, things will be very difficult. And now, after talking about the importance of causes and conditions, let's now look at the ways to which we can understand how cause and condition exist. If we were to see or try to look for cause and condition in everything, let me give you an example. If your computer breaks down, it doesn't work, then a way to look into its causes and conditions were to carefully examine this computer and ask yourself, why doesn't it work? Is it because I had forgotten to plug in to power? Or is it because the memories are not enough? Or is it because the hard disk is damaged? And so on. These are all the various conditions. A second question would be, when a space shuttle fails to launch, we'll ask ourselves, why doesn't the space shuttle launch? And then we need to explore the causes and conditions that lie behind them. It could be a reason of computer error. It could be some kind of miscalculation so that the space doesn't launch. Or I could also ask you, why does the house collapse? And the causes and conditions would be because of a missing pole. It could also be because of an unstable structure. Or other conditions will be the result of natural disasters such as hurricanes or typhoons or even earthquakes and so on. Therefore, these are all causes and conditions which makes a house collapse, which makes a space shuttle fail to launch. And these are also the causes and conditions which cause a computer to malfunction and so on. We could even look at ourselves. There are times we all get sick. Therefore, we can practice an observation of causes and conditions by asking ourselves, why do we fall ill? And an answer could be because of an imbalance of the 4 major elements in our body: earth, water, wind, and fire. When the temperature is too high, when we don't drink enough water, or when our body feels rigid, or when we overuse it, and of course we will fall ill. Therefore, what I'm trying to say with the demonstration of all these examples is that when problems arise, the thing we need to do is to first reflect and then look for the missing conditions. And only through real-life experiences will we be able to really see the existence of causes and conditions. And by using these examples, it also proves this point. We cannot just talk about the theory. We also have to look into everything that happens around us in order to understand the way causes and conditions work.